Ellis Cinema back, another dish. How we doing out there? Good, great, grand, and wonderful. As you see on your screen or your dial or however you are joining us today, Blue Underground's release of Dead and Buried. Something very strange is happening in the quiet coastal village of Potter's Bluff, where tourists and transients are warmly welcomed and then brutally murdered. Of course, it's a horror film. It's a horror film from the. But even more shocking is when these slain strangers suddenly reappear as normal, friendly citizens around town. Now the local sheriff and mortician must uncover the horrific secret of a community where some terrifying traditions are alive and well, and no one is ever really dead and buried. So, Blue Underground coming at you with another just fantastic release, another fantastic restoration. In fact, the restoration was so good that when I was thinking of doing some coverage for this show, I only had one person in mind to talk with me, because I think with horror films in general these days, when we're going back and doing a lot of restoration, sometimes it can do more harm than good. There's a couple moments of, say, the 4K restoration of Evil Dead that I was kind of like, oh, I missed the VHS, just grainy quality to it. So when I saw this particular restoration, I was absolutely blown away, and I think one of the many reasons that this film holds up this film was 81, so, we're pushing 40 years ago now, and I think one of the many reasons that it holds up is how it looks, the time that it took to give you the visual storytelling that Dead and Buried brings. So there's so many aspects about this film, but I think what you can do with the older films is I think you can separate yourself and give your film a lot more legs, which is why this is appealing to a younger crowd, because of the visuals, because of the look. So naturally, Ellis Cinema had to reach out to the man responsible for the visual content that you are seeing on the screen in Dead and Buried, all the way from Los Angeles, joining us for the first time. Hopefully he'll come back for a second time. Hopefully I don't annoy him too much. But joining us for the first time, Mr. Stephen Poster, cinematographer on Dead and Buried. Sir, thank you so much for coming on.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's just get right into it. I always urge people, you can Google my guest. I tend not to list too many accolades, because I like to have you as long as I can. And I know some people, they get a little annoyed, like you had me on the shows so you could read back my credits to me. I don't have time. I don't have time for this. So
come on, I love hearing my credits. It's okay.
I'll tell you two of my favorite films that you had worked on, that you were actually second unit. I know everybody loves Donnie Darko, and specifically the look of Donnie Darko, which Steven is responsible for. But I got to be honest with you, sir. You got two others on your catalog that I love. One, you'll probably understand. The other, you may look at me strange. You may look at me strange. So one of them, the easy one, is Big Trouble in Little China. Easily one of my favorite films of all time. It never gets old. I probably watch it 2-3 times a year. And then the one that's going to make you raise your eyebrows, Basketball. I love Basketball. It is one of my favorite comedies of all time. I understand that perhaps for the newer crowd, the way that the culture is these days, it's not for everyone, but that's another one too. I think Trey Parker and Matt Stone are geniuses. And when I was, doing a little research and I saw that you were on that, I said, I would kick myself if I have the opportunity to bring up Basketball organically on the show, I'm going to do it. So it's just
great. And I really only did a couple of days on it. They gave me a credit. It's very nice.
Oh gosh, Basketball is so bizarre, so wild. So so before we get into some of the softball questions, like I had told you before we started rolling, we have a lot of aspiring filmmakers that listen to the show, a lot of people that are, behind the camera. Because it's so much easier nowadays to be behind the camera. It wasn't always like this. You didn't have a 4K or 1080p camera on your phone even as early as 10 years ago. So one of the things I wanted to ask you was, what does the restoration process look like for someone like you? So when you read the back of this that says restoration has been approved by Stephen Poster, what exactly does that mean for my audience members that may not know?
Well, we're in a period now. In fact, I'm just writing an article about this for British Cinematographer for their September issue. We're in a period right now where there is this voracious worldwide market for media, and it's people are discovering their libraries, and remastering is going on like crazy. There's a lot of companies that are servicing companies like this one that redid Dead and Buried. Bill Lustig runs this company, and he's just terrific about bringing back some of the more obscure things out there. But any streamer now has the ability to use material like this and sell material like this. So it's become a real industry to be able to remaster. And this is a great opportunity for people. I mean, realize that in 1981, I didn't have the kind of tools that we have now to do some of this work. The tools that we have now are so incredibly advanced that you can really, I hate to say the sky's the limit, but it really is. And there are so many opportunities to really improve stuff, not only just recreate what you did initially, but make it better. And that's the exciting part about it for a cinematographer, I know, and I'm sure for a director too. A director can't really recut the movie. I can retime the movie or grade the movie. We call it timing or grading when you apply color correction and when you treat the image that way. Otherwise, you could just call it color correction too. But we don't ever do that with things in the movie business. So it's a wonderful opportunity to redo that. Now, you so many things get remastered, and they never bother to even call the cinematographer. It's like, who a cinematographer? Who's that? What does he do? And or she? It's a time where you have to, as a cinematographer, if there are movies that you've done that are important to you, you almost have to track it yourself to find out who's got it, who's going to redo it, and how do you get in on it. And I doggedly track certain movies that I've always wanted to get my hands on and redo in terms of the color correction with today's tools. Today's tools are remarkable, and I have had a hand in helping develop and promote these tools, which I'm very proud of. I mean, that's been a thrust of mine for many, many years. It's a process. We have a process called digital intermediate, where the original film, if you can get your hands on the negative, is scanned digitally at a very high quality rate, and then you go in and you can. I'm sure many of your listeners know what Photoshop is. This is Photoshop on steroids. We can affect any part, any quality, any texture of an image. It's at any given spot. I can do this, I can do that, I can do that. So it's a remarkable tool in that sense. Not that I want to change everything. I just want to make it look better and more contemporary. So was I was only the third director of photography in the world to ever have done a digital intermediate on any movie, and that was Stuart Little too. What had happened was I was in France and had made friends with. I was shooting a movie in France for a French director, and I made friends with a group of technologists in France, and found out that they were doing this movie called Amelie. Okay. And I went to visit the process of color correcting on Amelie, which I don't even think they called it digital intermediate at that point. It was just digitized, and they were doing this very strange and wonderful color treatment on it. It's just a marvelous movie. And then I was home. I was in LA, and I was up at a company called Cinematographer, which was owned by Kodak. And Sir Roger Deakins, was color correcting "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou," which also had a very specific look with color that probably might not even have been able to be done prior to digitizing. So those two movies were were 1 and 2. I don't know which kind of came first in terms of starting to do the process, but "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" and Amelie were the first two. I was in the process of shooting Stuart Little 2. Any movie that has a number after it, is of course you have a guideline from what the first movie was. Right. And I had heard from the cinematographer. I did a couple of days on Stuart Little 1 for the company, and I had long talks with the director of photography of Stuart Little 1, and also with the studio, and realized that there was a tremendous problem that they had, because they were creating this white mouse, digitally. It was one of the first, in fact, they had to invent how to do fur, digitally. On our movie, they had to invent how to do feathers. So, I mean, technically, invent the way these objects were represented digitally. So it's very complicated. I mean, very complicated mathematics and electronics and digitization and everything. It's very deep.
Time too. A lot of time invested.
Yes.
In that.
Yes. So I realized, and what I heard was that they had a hard time marrying the production material, the actual live production material, with the digital material, which was primarily the mouse. And because because the process is called compositing, where you take a live action and an animation piece and put it together, and you composite the two of them. And if you have to color correct the image to make it even, you will end up changing the color of the white mouse. So you need it to be a little more, the production material to be a little more red. If you're doing this photochemically, you can't really individually change the layers to match. And I had heard that they had a really difficult time making the print in Stuart Little 1. So I realized that, having seen the process of digital intermediate, that we could do it easily if we did this digitally. There were no systems in America at that point. except CineSight and Kodak, and then there was one other company that was doing some of this. The software to do this had been invented by a couple of Hungarian brothers in Hungary, called a company called Colorfront Software, and there was one company that was installing that on their computers and starting to do that work. And I went to the head of post-production at Sony and said, I think this is the way we're going to have to go. Well, no, nobody had done that, and it's going to cost us money, and we don't want to do that, and blah, 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 on. And so it took me, and of course, it was a long post-production period because they had to do the animation. So it took a year for me to convince the studio that this was the way to go to make this print, to allow them to finally, or for them to allow me and the studio and the ImageWorks, Sony ImageWorks, their visual effects department, to create a system to be able to do this digital intermediate. It was fraught with problems, but Sony ImageWorks was completely on board with us, and in fact, a man named George Joblove, who was the head scientist over there, and technology guy, was very excited about the process, and he created a digital pipeline, which is how you get material from one machine to another, and how you transport everything, and how you ultimately go into making the final print of the movie. So we got the go ahead to try it, and they gave us 3 weeks to do a proof of concept. I actually borrowed the only color corrector, which was a machine that interfaces digitally, so you can create the colors and correct things as you go. I borrowed this thing called the Colossus, which was being brought in from England by a friend of mine. And I said, listen, I'm going to need it for the whole movie. And he said, okay. And Sony, of course, thought I was somehow making money on this when they weren't paying for it in the first place. But we managed to get through the outdoor soccer field scene, which was a kind of a nightmare for us. We had to hire a colorist. It's called the position is called a colorist. So we got a freelance person out. Actually, I took him out of another company who I had worked with on commercials for many years, and we were given a room with a monitor that we didn't even have a projector to start with. And we were literally making it up as we went along. And during those 3 weeks, we were sleeping on the carpet in the DI suite. It was quite an adventure. And we ended up finishing the movie in digital, and it was fraught with problems. So to be able to do this work now, it's so ubiquitous that every post-production house can do these digital intermediates. They all have digital projectors. They all have a system. They all have the science and technology to do it. And so now we have the ability to remaster these things without making a photochemical print. So that's a huge opportunity. And so we as cinematographers, I will tell you, there are 4 or 5 titles that I constantly monitor to make sure that they're going to be eventually remastered, because I want to get my hands on them, because this is fun. It's a process that I love, love doing. And with Dead and Buried, and it varies with each company. They did the majority of the work in England on this, and then sent me a digital copy to review. So that's what that means. So I reviewed it, and I made some changes, and I made some. So it wasn't as though that I was starting from scratch, which I would have loved to have done. But I did have the opportunity to make some stylistic changes and corrections and some ideas that I had wanted to incorporate into this process. Now, I think that I'm not sure. I'm pretty positive that we did this from two elements. You know, this movie didn't really exist, and you have to go on a detective hunt. The company that wants to do it will go on a detective hunt to find the original negative if they can, and if not, then some elements down the way. This was, I believe, done from in the photochemical process. You have dupes and internegatives and interpositives, and when you have your negative, you have to create an interpositive, so then you can create an internegative, so then you can make multiple prints. Well, we had, I think, half of a digital intermediate, or not a digital, half of an internegative, and was found in London, and the other half of the movie was found as an interpositive in France. I mean, these things get distributed all over the world, and the soundtrack came from somewhere else, as far as I know. They were able to put these together and use these elements digitally to create the final release of what you saw.
I think, I mean, and like I kind of said at the beginning of the show, not always do they work. And I understand that I'm biased, because I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to film, but I'm biased in the sense that it's almost like I feel horror films specifically are the ones that, and it's manufactured. It's a manufactured bias. Like, it doesn't make any sense, but I almost, well, you would know. You would know more so than I. I just think that there's a lot of things a lot of emotion that can be sold on a grainier, darker, all the adjective. With horror films specifically that just don't exist. I mean, I guess you can remaster Saving Private Ryan and Schindler's List and all that stuff like that. What if
they all do?
Yeah, they all do. And it's just, for horror films, I just think you got to be really careful how you go about that. I do not see, and I'm sure you do, but that I don't count you. You don't count when you're watching your own stuff. But I don't see. There's not one flaw from a visual aspect that I see in this film. In fact, when I was listening to your commentary on the film, I mean, I learned so much. I mean, one thing, as I tend to do, I always sidetrack. But one thing that you had said, like, it just has to be fascinating for you to see the progression of cinematography from when you started to now. And even you had said when you were working on Dead and Buried, you were doing a lot of things that were new, and you were kind of using new technologies on the fly. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, but it was all photochemical based. It wasn't as though we were reinventing the wheel. But in my, let's say, my youthful naivety, I had certain stylistic things that I wanted to do that were photographically in my kind of stylistic wheelhouse, and we shot this movie for the most part up in Mendocino, County in Mendocino in north of San Francisco. And remember the years that it was, and we were up in Mendocino for 4 months making this movie with very little or no adult supervision. So you can imagine.
It sounded like a wild time. I mean, you guys were up there. I think you said you guys did 4 months of shooting, and you guys all stayed up there, right?
We stayed up there. We rented houses. I shared a house with the assistant director, Brian Frankish, and we had a couple of production assistants living in our house who would take care of stuff for us. And that became the company party house, actually. And we were on the headlands of Mendocino Headlands, and the ocean was there. It was a beautiful, beautiful spot, just beautiful. The town at the time was filled with many Portuguese fisher people, men and women who that was their industry, and lumber was another industry up there. There wasn't much else. There was some tourism, but not much. And in fact, next to the town, there was something called the Mendocino Woods, which was a wooded area. The cops had estimated that there were at least 500 hippies living in the woods somewhere. Really, seriously, people would wander out, kind of dazed and confused, and oh my God, what drug did I take today? But it was that kind of atmosphere, and we were working 6 days a week, which is pretty tough. But it was a young group, and we were working with friends. We had put together a very close group working on this movie in terms of my crews, the grip, electric, and camera crews. We were all very close friends. We had worked in commercials and came up together in the business. And the director, Gary Sherman, was someone I went to college with. So we had done a lot of work after college in Chicago. We went to the Institute of Design at Illinois Institute of Technology, and Gary started a little company, and we made some documentary films and some industrial films, and we made one short, which to this day we don't know where the print is from that one short, unfortunately, but it was something that
short again. What's that short called again?
Cry Angel.
Okay.
Cry Angel. And to this day, I never figured out what it was about. But Gary went off after a few years to England and worked in England. He did Deathline, which was a very interesting movie that I think was remastered recently, I would guess. And then came back and we did Dead and Buried. And we did, was it after or before? I think it might have been before we did The Mysterious 2 for television, which was a kind of interesting cult story about two people who had a cult. I don't know if it was in relation to the Jones, to the, what happened in South Central America, but we got this picture. Actually, Gary did me a huge favor, because I had not shot a feature film when Gary was prepping this, and the producers said, well, you have to have somebody who's done a feature film. I had done tons of television and commercials, industrial films, documentaries, educational films, everything else. but I didn't have a feature film credit under my belt. So Gary's friend was about to do a movie, and they needed a director of photography, and he got me hired on this movie called Blood Beach. And Blood Beach was another horror film. It was the monster that lived under the Santa Monica beach that sucked people under the sand and ate them. You know, that was the this worm was under the beach. And I think the tagline was it was after Jaws. So the tagline was, "Now that you're not afraid to go in the water again, you can't even get across the beach."
Yep, that's what it was.
So he managed to convince the director to hire me on that. That was my first feature, which allowed him to hire me then on Dead and Buried. And it was an extraordinary 4 months. It was tremendous fun. It was constant burning creativity. We were so young and enthusiastic, and we were doing stuff that no sane studio would have let us if we had adult supervision up there. And it was all meant to be photographically unique in that sense, and that's what we ended up with Dead and Buried. There's stuff in there that I might not even try today because, oh my God, what we were doing was so out of mainstream in terms of the business. You know, even though some fantastical stuff is going on now in terms of technology that you couldn't even imagine back then. For instance, when we get started, normally the laboratory, which was Technicolor at the time, is the partner of the DP, and there's usually one person at that company that will be your liaison, you know, and you talk to that person every day as you send film in. I'll never forget, it was a guy named Skip Nicholson, and he was he worked with me on a number of other movie television shows, so and on Dead and Buried, on Blood Beach. So he knew me pretty well, but and I sent him a script so he would know what it was that we were shooting, and that's a normal process, so that the person in charge of your dailies has an idea of what it is you're going for. So I sent in, I think, the first couple days dailies, and he got them and processed them and looked at them and called me up and said, "You know, I don't know what you're doing at this, Stephen, but with all this blue stuff, and the people look kind of blue, and what's going on here? I mean, I don't think you're doing this. This is probably a big problem, going to be a big problem for you." And I'm sitting there being berated, and I said, "By the way, Skip, did you read the script?" He said, "Well, I haven't had a chance to yet." And I said, "Do you realize that all the people you're looking at on the screen are dead?" And he said, "Oh, well, that's a brilliant idea."
Oh, I tell you what, the studios, you know, and I don't want to bash any studios or producers or anything, but boy, do they! I mean, even again, this is what I do. I derail. I have 10 pages of notes. I'm only going to touch 2 paragraphs. This is the bane of my existence for every show. But you're saying things that remind me of a couple of things that were talked about throughout the bonus features. But initially, this wasn't supposed to be as violent as it was, right? And then producers, now correct me if I'm wrong, but the movie got picked up by another set of producers, and you guys actually went back to do a lot of pickups for the more violent stuff, right?
Yeah, I kind of don't remember much of that, but yes. I think there
Okay.
was.
Well, so when I was listening to you talk about it, you had just said like a lot of the violence you had to, specifically like the boat dock sequence where the gentleman gets his face cut and his throat slit. Like you went back and I know you said you it was hard for you to watch a couple of those scenes just mainly because of your work. I just want to tell you, I think everything works. There's so many shots in here that I absolutely love. Just a few of them off the top of my head. The opening shot where Freddie finally kind of walks out to the beach, you have a continuous shot going from his van, and now we're surrounded by these rock fixtures, and he's just kind of standing there center frame. But it's a long wide shot, and I was like, this looks beautiful. As far as creating a character just with your visuals, I think the arrival of the mortician Dobbs, it's great. The amount of diffusion that you use as his lights are coming, it's perfect. And I mean, obviously, I let's call a spade a spade. The big
Yeah,
band, the big band music that's playing when he arrives, that has a lot to do with the introduction of the character. But
yeah,
there's so much stuff, outside of the hotel when. Sheriff Dan and the manager are talking. You do a shot where you're starting outside and you pull in as their conversation goes from the porch to the inside. And you said that you had cringed watching that, but I'm here to tell you that the effect that it had on my eyes was very similar to what happens in real life to your eyes. If you're out on the lake all day or whatever, and then you walk into the house, you have that adjustment. That's actually what I felt when I was watching that scene. And of course, you know better than I do, but when I was listening to you, I was like, I don't know what he's talking about. I think that's good. That's great. I think it works perfectly.
well, there were so many opportunities to do things that Gary's direction that called for, and we were just so excited to be able to do. We did a dolly shot inside an SUV. We did. I mean, now with tools that we have now, we can do a lot of these things very very easily with small cameras. And I realized that camera that we used is about that big. So it was not easy to accomplish the things that we wanted to accomplish. So it made it that much harder and more exciting to be able to do some of these things. There was a shot when Jimmy's wife, James Ferrantino's wife, what was her name in the movie?
Janet.
Janet, right. Janet drives up outside and then goes into the house and talks to him. He's sitting in a chair, talks to him, and then she ends up going out for the evening, gets up and goes out and goes back to her car. That was done in one shot. The whole thing was done in one shot.
I love it.
And
Absolutely.
the way we did it was we created kind of a sled. So the camera was looking outside. It was as though it were outside, sees her walk up the stairs, and the camera pulls back, and then the camera keeps pulling back continuously, slowly, as she gets her key out and opens the door, and all of a sudden you're inside the house. And we go back, and she crosses over into the living room. The camera crosses over with her. There's a wall in between, and we start in on this dolly and go into. By the time we're done, we're in a close up of Jimmy Ferrantino, and he's very upset. And he's not trusting his wife at this point. And she's just doing this, hi, I'm blah, 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 and talking continually. And she gets up and leaves the shot. And the camera, and they cut there, unfortunately. But what happened in reality, the camera goes past him. As he turns toward the window, the camera goes past him. and goes to the window, and we see her outside getting back in her car and driving off.
Yeah, they cut so much good stuff that you were.
That was unfortunately a cut, but we got most of it in, and it was all done physically. There were no digital effects. There was nothing to make it work. What we did was we built the door, and we carried the door on the dolly, so that the camera was up against the glass, and as she's fumbling for her keys, the grips released the camera from the door to continue pulling back. She opened the door and came in. So we were doing stuff like that all the time. Everything that we did was that kind of very complicated shots that were done in one that you would never even think about having been done in one. And so it was really exciting that way.
And I got to think, too, it makes it even harder because these were all practical locations. They were, I think the only thing that was done on set was the inside of the
mortuary.
Yeah.
Which we did back in L.A. after we were done shooting in Mendocino. I'm laughing because this was such a close group of people. Very close, actors and crew and everything. We were there for 4 months together. We were partying every Friday night. Saturday night, which would be the end of the sixth day. We would wrap and by maybe 11 o'clock, and by 12 o'clock there were 50 cars in front of our house, and the party started, and it lasted usually some of those weekends. It would last until the kids had to go back to work.
It was snubbing out that last cigarette on Monday.
Hard party. We came back to LA, and the company was not going to allow us to have they weren't going to pay for a wrap party. And we thought that was a terrible idea, that we needed to have a wrap party. We needed to be together So I volunteered my house for a wrap party. This is true, by the way. The wrap party lasted for 3 weeks, 24 hours a day.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Any casualties?
There were. There was one guy that was so screwed up by a certain point that he disappeared, and we found out that he ended up getting on an airplane and going to Seattle. I mean, it just was, it was nuts. Stuff like that was happening all the time. We would get food deliveries twice a day, and other nefarious materials would show up, and people would come and go, and would still be going on literally 3 weeks.
Oh man, it just everything about this film is. I mean, it sounds like. I mean, it's fun to watch. It's fun to make. It just you can tell by watching it. There's a labor of love to it. I mean, there really is.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's on the. And I hate. Usually, I hate cliche phrases like that. But for something like this that is still finding an audience 40 years later, I think people forget just how important that is. Not to say that if there's toxicity on a set, that the movie still can't be great, but I
absolutely there's no relationship, by the way, which is the weird thing. You can do a great movie and people have hated each other, and you can do a movie that is just mediocre and everybody had a great time. So go figure.
Yeah, seek Jaws. All those three. Well, the two of them hated each other on set. And it's one of the greatest movies of all time. So.
Yeah.
So we have gone way over than what I want to, and I start getting nervous. I'm a very nervous person sometimes, but sometimes. I would love to continue this conversation. I didn't even get to. I have so many questions here. Like, what was it like to shoot an actual man on fire? What what was it like shooting the syringe to the eye sequence?
Oh,
You
that
know,
was a good one.
I mean, yeah, you got to work with Stan Winston, who, I mean, I, I feel, again, I feel cliche in saying this, but like practical effects until they put me in the ground. Like I just, that when I'm watching horror stuff, like
Yeah,
it's got to be a real werewolf. It's got to be a real Frankenstein. It can't, I grew up with Universal monster movies. That's, most kids were, my age in the 80s were watching Sesame Street and everything else. I'm watching Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. Like I just had a different upbringing,
yeah,
so I have to have the practical effects. And I think this is a gem, so we restore a lot of stuff that maybe we didn't need to, or
yeah.
the movie wasn't that good to have a 30-year anniversary release or what have you. But Stephen, I don't want to take up any more of your time today, but I would love to have you back on to.
Absolutely, this is fun. It's always fun to talk about this stuff. I mean, there's other movies. There's one other movie that I've been trying to track down and trying to find out if they would ever do a re-release on it, which I think they should. It was an important cultural icon of the time. It was called Strange Brew.
Yes, of course, Strange Brew, the classic Canadian film. I know of Strange Brew. I would say only about 30% of my audience knows Strange Brew, but that's fine by me. It is an unsung comedy gem, if you ask me.
Absolutely, genius, genius. And that's something I want to get my hands on and redo some point.
I'm sure it will. I mean, I have to think, at least for my age group, like Strange Brews would be infinitely more. Well, comedy in general has always been more popular than horror, so it's actually kind of no excuse that hasn't had a re-release yet.
No, I know, and I've been trying to. I've talked to the guys about doing a sequel, like with the kids of Strange Brew and Bob and Doug, and the problem is you never know where the rights end up. The reason that Blood Beach has never been remastered is because nobody knows who owns the rights. It's true. It's like when the mortgage crisis happened. People didn't know who were holding the mortgages. It's the same thing. Certain rights get passed down and sold and sold and sold. Libraries get sold and whatever. And you have. I've talked to Bill Lustig about it several times about doing Dead and Buried, and he said he can't find out who owns it.
I gotta assume Bill's just kind of a wild guy, isn't he?
Oh, he's great. He's just great. He does these obscure movies that are wonderful.
I'm kind of it's I may lose you here for a second. Actually, I think one of my favorite works by Bill is actually the sequel to Maniac Cop. I don't know why I like Maniac Cop 2 more so than Maniac Cop 1. Maybe just because it's so batshit insane. Well, the first one's batshit insane, but the second one is definitely over the top. You're killing Bruce Campbell in the first 15 minutes. Spoiler alert for people that haven't seen it yet, but that's some of my favorite work of his for sure.
Great, great. Well, terrific.
Stephen, I will definitely reach out to you. I would love to continue this conversation. Like I said, I have 13 more questions that I wanted to ask you. So, I would love to do this again if you'll have me.
Absolutely. Let's get to it.
All righty, sir. You have a good afternoon in sunny California, and we will talk soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Wow, what a great interview with Steven, huh? For those of you that probably don't know, this is like the fifth time I've tried to get this fucking audio to go up on Spotify and Apple Podcast. I think I'm done doing Zoom. It ruins every interview I do. At least the system or the program that I use to host the podcast, whatever reason, the audio is so fucking terrible, and the first one was unlistenable, so I had to try to find my way around it. Anyway, this Dead and Buried box set has everything on it. It's got 4 commentaries on it. One with director Gary Sherman. The second one has Ronald Shusett, the writer and producer of Dead and Buried. He also had a hand in writing Alien, the original. The third commentary is with our guest, Stephen Poster. Great, super informative commentary. He's just a fucking smart, just super intelligent individual. We have 4 new. I'm sorry, I missed the fourth commentary with film historians Troy Howarth and Nathaniel Thompson. We have 4 more new featurettes. We got Behind the Scenes of Dead and Buried, a new one. Dead and Buried Locations Now and Then. I love how Blue Underground is presenting that to you as far as the visuals and how they're showing it to you. Absolutely love it. We have Murders, Mystery, and Music, which is with interviews with director Gary Sherman and composer Joe Renzetti, and actually the soundtrack comes in this box set, its own disc. You have The Pages of Potter's Bluff, an interview with the novelization author Chelsea Quinn Yarbrough, who is no stranger to the horror community. You have a little bit older featurette with Stan Winston talking about his time and work on Dead and Buried, and it's so fascinating. I miss Stan so much. I mean, he's just legend. I don't know if anybody will ever come, close to him and a couple of other cats in terms of practical effects. A horror box set wouldn't be complete unless you had a Robert Englund interview on it, like we do here. An early work of horror with Robert Englund, and if you don't know who Robert Englund is, well, I'm not going to tell you, you fucking... Anyway, what else we got? We got Crafting Fear, a featurette with Dan O'Bannon. We have theatrical trailers. We have a posters and stills gallery. We have Stephen Poster's original locations stills. As aforementioned, the original motion picture soundtrack by Joe Renzetti comes with the box set, and a bonus collectible booklet with new essay by Michael Gingold. So make sure you go out and check out that Blue Underground release right now. And if you're like, Sean, I haven't seen it, I'm not going to spend $30-$40 on a special edition collector's set just because you told me to. Well, number one, well, that's mean. I wouldn't be doing this show if I didn't think it was worth every penny, but I get it. I get it. We live in a streaming age. So how about this? It's free. Dead and Buried is free to stream on, I believe, Vudu and Tubi. Both apps are free. They don't require any credit card information or anything of the sort. So if you need to view this first, you're not going to see the great 4K restoration of it, but check it out, stream it. If you like it, buy it, and then listen to the commentary with Steve, and then re-listen to this podcast. Anyway, I think we've had, like I said, this is like the 5th fucking time I've tried to record this goddamn thing, so it's almost like this one's gonna work or bust, because I've had it. I don't know if I'll ever do a Zoom interview. You hear how terrible that sounds? If you saw what I was doing, you'd be so angry. But yeah, I think I mean, they're great in terms of a visual tool, but they fuck up my audio every time, and there's honestly no good way to correct it. Anyway, Ellis Cinema, Stephen Poster, Dead and Buried, 4K Blue Underground release available now. You have no excuses, ladies and gentlemen. Go and check this out. Meow. Oh, fucking worst audio ever. God damn it.